Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we hear about it all the time. Corporate upheaval. People don't like their jobs. They change jobs every 20 seconds. We want to stop that. And so I am so delighted to introduce my guest today because she is an expert in this. So please join me in welcoming Kathy Parry to our program today. Welcome, Kathy. How are you?
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm doing great.
Great. Well, I was delighted to actually hear Kathy speak at the Georgia Senior Living Association in annual meeting and thought, must have this woman on the podcast. And so it's so cool that we were able to get that done. But let me tell folks a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Kathy Parry doesn't just walk into a room, she energizes it. She is a nationally recognized keynote speaker and authority on workplace resilience, energy, and purpose-driven performance. With a foundation in corporate training and deep roots in caregiving and wellness, Kathy empowers professionals to stay energized even in the face of relentless disruption. Kathy holds degrees in business and food management from Miami University, a certification in plant-based nutrition from T.Colin Campbell Program at eCornell University, and a QualityCare Certification from the Alzheimer's Association. She holds the designation of Certified Speaking Professional, which is a CSP, from the National Speakers Association, and she speaks at events, as I said, nationwide. Kathy has authored 6 books, including The Rubber Band Resilient Leader, and is the creator of Power Up Leadership Workshop. She lives near Canton, Ohio, where she enjoys a mild dark chocolate addiction, hence the reason I like her, and cooking for hungry friends. So again, Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's great to be with you.
You know, we really are going to have a great discussion, but tell us a little bit about how it is that you got to where you are today.
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you kind of the fast and furious condensed version, but I started my career as a corporate bank trainer. So I always knew that I loved to stand up in front of people. I like to disseminate information. And so that seemed to be a great place for me. But it also sparked the beginnings of being in front of people who didn't really want my information because I was coming but I was coming into their world full of disruption because a lot of what I was training was on new systems and things that they were going to have to adapt to. So I did that for a number of years and then took some time off to raise a family. And my youngest child of 4 was actually born with a degenerative disease, which really was the big upheaval, disruption of my life, because when I walked into the doctor's office and they said the best we can hope for is 2 years, that's the type of disruption that no one wants to hear.
No.
You know, disruption
for that.
No. So, but what that taught me was she had what was called the disease of no energy. So then I did this deep dive into natural health and how to keep her healthy. And this was all in the early 2000s. And then she didn't get better, but she stayed alive. She lived till 20. The good news of this whole story is she did live 20 full years. She was had severe disabilities. But what it also got me doing again was speaking, because people kept saying, well, what are you doing? This is before we could Google every new trend. And should we drink beef broth and eat, or beef bone broth and eat kale? We didn't know all of this. So I did the research and got certified, but it got me back into the speaking circuit again. So while I was doing some of more wellness and corporate wellness, that over the years has then morphed back to my roots as a corporate trainer and doing keynotes. So that's kind of where I got where I am. And now I help probably about 80% of my work is in the caregiving space. So that's kind of how we met through senior care. But I'll tap back into my corporate roots as well with banking and financial services. That's how I got here.
I love it. Well, first of all, so sorry to hear about your daughter. I had somebody tell me one time, still talk about them. They existed, right? And I'm sure she's very proud of you, and what you do. I love on your website, you say that you're a corporate energy expert. So let's delve into that a little bit more, because people are like, what on earth does that mean?
Uh-oh, you've just scared me, because people say be clear, not clever. But thank you for
But see, it makes them ask. So that's, yes, the marketing person in me likes that.
Awesome. Yes. Well, have you walked into a business and you felt welcome? You felt the energy. You felt like people wanted to take care of you or cared. Yes, that's what I mean by we want to energize your teams. We want to energize your culture so that your clients, your customers, the people that you serve feel that as well. And then on the flip side, you've probably walked in or been cared for by an organization where it's like, they don't care if I'm standing here or not. These people, they complain right in front of you. I mean, I know we've probably all been there where you actually hear employees complaining in front of you and that kind of thing. So as a corporate energy expert, I look at those cultural cues that keep the energy up. So people stay, retaining people, they're giving at their highest level, they're connected with the purpose. So it's just building those stronger teams and that stronger culture.
I love it. Yeah, I've worked in corporate environments where they were quieter than libraries. And that ain't me. But it is something where there is that energy where people feel it, and when it's tamped down, and I've been told, shh, you need to tone it down, honey. Well, then and I get that, right? Yes, I am, I am a little over the top. But at the same point, that immediately made me think, ooh, I don't want to be here. And that's the thing, is how can we encourage people to be who they are? Because they're obviously the introverts of the world that would not want to speak to anybody, but we need to have what works for people that is going to help them.
Yeah. Well, and part of that starts at the hiring decision as well. A team leader, a manager, a director, they need to be crystal clear on who would best fill that role. And unfortunately, in so many, especially in caregiving organizations and, medical, some of these things, they've been short staffed. And so they've had to, maybe take on someone that wasn't exactly right for the role, but that always comes back because it's not a cultural fit. And there are people out there who do that work beautifully to try to define what is the best cultural fit for this organization or this team. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned senior living. I work with a lot of senior living communities, and the primary people I work with are the activity directors, right? Who've got to be bubbly and up there and ready to do everything at the spur of the moment. But the caregivers are the ones that are the quiet, the nurturing, and I think it's exactly what you said. Everybody has a role, and their energy has, needs to match that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that gets one of the points I like to make when I'm working with teams is, and especially leaders, are you helping the people on your team truly connect with the purpose, why what they do matters? So at the end, my keynote, people will come up to me and they'll say, when you talked about purpose, that really resonated because I do things that aren't in my job description. And most of us do that when, any organization.
And other duties as assigned part.
Right. Or not assigned, no one assigned that I needed to be the joke teller of the day or the one that fills the burn feeders outside, but when people connect with the why, it matters what they do. And when a leader acknowledges that they're connecting with the why, people stay. And I've seen like in younger generations, I'll just say younger than me. I've got children who are, in the millennial and X generations. Purpose matters to them. They want their work to matter. And I think often leaders forget. It's like, oh, they're doing well, they're doing great. But we forget to reinforce the importance of you are fulfilling a purpose here. Yeah.
And I think probably one of the biggest issues is companies don't know what their purpose, what their why is. If you tell them, hey, read Simon Sinek, they're going to go, why? Right? That's the wrong why. But, they think our purpose is make money. And they don't understand that that's the bottom of the thing. Everything else, if it goes well, means they will make money.
Right. Sure. But one of the ways they make money is to retain their team members. So if they can connect that team member with something beyond the bottom line, that's more, well, when we reach this goal, that means we're serving X person, and you got into this industry because you wanted to help those people. Look at how your role in data analytics is actually supporting the care that we do. So connecting all those dots is so important.
Right. And I love when managers, owners, whoever really looks at their team members and what they're good at. I remember, one time I was working with a young woman on her LinkedIn profile because she'd been with her company a million years and it just wasn't ringing her bell anymore. So she wanted to leave. And she called me and she said, well, my boss saw my LinkedIn profile and guessed that I was wanting to leave. I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. And she said, got called in. And they had a wonderful discussion, which usually wouldn't happen, right? Her boss said, why do you want to leave? And she was very honest. And the boss said, well, and then, well, what do you want to do? So she, this is what really interests me now. And the boss, a very smart person, said, well, you could still do that here, just in another department. Can we make that happen? So, of course, she got to keep her benefits. As she put, I got my parking spot. But, how many times do people say, I don't want to be here, and nobody bothers to see if there's any alternatives?
Yeah. Or to ask the questions. I commend that leader for saying, let's talk more about it. Tell me more. Because when you get to some of those root issues of why someone might be thinking of exiting, very important to say, what more could we do, or understand the motive behind it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, those are absolutely critical. And we all think they're kind of, we don't pay attention to it, or, if we're the person who's leaving, we just say, well, it wasn't a good fit, because we don't want to burn bridges. But knowing those whys is going to help with the next employees, and even if it's something like, I wanted to work from home more, or I wanted to come into the office more, or I need flexible hours, or whatever, maybe they could make that happen. And then that would be something that would help with retention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all know that filling a position is a pain in a variety of ways. And so it is, the best thing to try and keep those employees. Obviously, there are some that you want to say, don't let the door hit you on your way out. But but for the most part, you want to keep them. And so let's kind of walk through a little about this. How do we start really boosting retention?
Well, I mean, where I start with is always connecting with the purpose. And again, this is kind of in the caregiving space, but anything in customer service, we can teach skills. We always have to remember this. We can teach skills. We can't teach that special thing that makes somebody care about other people. And I've always said that if you get someone who, I'm looking at your personality, you've got a big personality, you should be forward-facing customers, clients, residents. That's who you are. So what I've seen is sometimes people are promoted and they're promoted on a skill set versus their ability to manage other people or their ability to get along with other people. So I think one criteria to start off with is really identify that persona. And of course, lots of organizations love to do all kinds of tests and, get your Myers-Briggs or get your DISC and see how you fit in. But remembering that if someone wants to be there, they can learn a skill set.
Right.
The next thing I say is that there are impurities in your culture that keep people or help people exit more quickly, because I call these impurities, and maybe you heard this when I gave my talk, I compare it to a cup of coffee, right? And I love Starbucks. So I happen to know that Starbucks triple filters their water to remove any impurities. So like little pieces of ammonia or toxic, chemicals that might filter through the body. They get rid of it all. So I tell organizations, what are those impurities that might be in your culture that might be affecting retention? And, of course, one is communication. I always say start with communication. It's the cheap one.
Right.
This is the one that really just some skill set and help. And communication, it needs to be clear. It needs to be communicated. It needs to be clear and communicated often and all the time. So just how is your team communicating, or is there implied knowledge when really, because I say once a team stops communicating effectively, gossip sneaks in.
Oh,
and that's
we want to fill those spaces.
Right? Sure. So, really seeking out what are those, one could be incivility. There could be incivility on your team and you don't even know it, but it's just some casual comments that somebody's making to somebody else. I one time had a friend who she had young children and they were calling a meeting later in the day. And in a meeting with the boss, and of course, they were all kind of trying to jockey for their positions on this team. Someone said, "Oh, well, don't you have childcare issues? Don't you need to get home?" And that was really, inappropriate because this person was trying to put themselves ahead of, the other person by saying, "I don't have anything to worry about." And of course, that was definitely a little spark of incivility on a team.
Right.
So
of course, that person would have said, "I was only trying to be helpful."
Right. But no, the implication was there. So yeah, looking for the impurities that keep members from being their happiest. And one of those that I've talked about, and actually I just did this in a recent, I was doing a workshop leadership retreat for an organization. And of course, they didn't really need to focus on loyalty because that was more for their leaders. But what we ended up focusing on as this impurity on the team was a lack of acceptance of change. They were implementing a new technology and there was a lot of pushback on it. So, is there a culture within your culture that is saying, "I don't like change. I'm not doing change. I have a bad mindset towards change."
Yeah, this gonna be bad.
Right. Yeah. So that's one where I feel currently with everything that's going on now, change is exponential. And as a leader, I think it's highly important if you are the head of a team to be helping them be accepting of the amount of change that is happening.
Right. And again, that comes back to communication. I was talking with someone who, and this was several years ago, they were going to be replacing a lot of what they did. They were an assembly line. And so they were going to be able to replace a lot of what they did with robotics. And people were panicked. "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job." And of course, what happened and what always happens when we have this is the best people leave first. The people who can't get a job somewhere else, they're still there. And so they noticed they were starting to lose people, and they realized what they had not said was, "We need all of you to learn how to run that new technology. And we're going to give you training." And of course, that put them way up on the job skills. But they just assumed that people knew, well, these robots aren't going to run themselves. Well, My thought would be the robots are going to run themselves. And so, yeah, it's that communication that often, we either assume they know or we don't know. I've done corporate communication and I hated it when we did not have answers. When you'd be going through layoffs, you'd be doing whatever. And I always told my CEOs, admit it.
Yeah.
People are perfectly fine with you saying, we don't have those answers, but when we get them, we will tell you. Because it's, as we said, otherwise they start making it up.
Right.
So just tell them, we don't know.
Right. Right. That's what I say. I mean, part of being a leader is humility and to step up and say, I don't have the answer right now, but I'm going to get you the best answer. And then, give that circle back time. Okay. It's going to be in 48 hours. I'm going to have a better answer and I'm going to come to you again. I may not have all the answer, but I'm going to have a better answer. And then you darn better show up 48 hours later with more information. Yeah.
47 if you can, but
True. 47 would be definitely better. Yes.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, I think, and we were talking about this before the program, I think right now with technology and specifically AI, there is so much concern that's out there. I mean, I use AI all the time. I love it. I think it's a great tool. It's not, for me, it's not going to replace what I do. Maybe it will. Who knows? Next time we could have a virtual AI of me here, right? But I think so many people are worried that their job, or at least part of their job, is going to be replaced by AI. And I was talking with somebody and they said, our company doesn't even hire entry-level positions anymore. It's all done by technology. And I mean, that's scary. So, how do we deal with this constant change?
Absolutely. So interesting. I just watched a short video and it was so revealing. It was about farmers 120 plus years ago who were threatened by the fact that, tractors were coming and there was, the farming was going to be taken over by combine, all the new, machines that were coming in. And it was equating this to exactly what's happening now. Think back to the 70s when the computers were starting to come in. Well, the computers are going to replace. No, we're just going to adapt. We're going to adapt. And, because I have children in that generation, they're adapting. They're figuring it out. They're like, okay, well, this career path, might not be the same one that I'm in, in the next 5 years because I have to keep building my skill set. There's a whole lot more with the building of the skill set that people are much more comfortable with. It used to be, we'd go to college for 4 years and boom, that was it.
Right. We're done. We've learned as much as we can learn.
Right. But we are definitely a society that is not doing that. That's why we have YouTube U. We learn things even if we're not even, enrolled in a formal program. And I think that's the key to a lot of these organizations who think that, oh, well, I'm going to replace this or people within the organization. Become a lifelong learner. Keep learning, to anybody, just be curious. I tell this to people all the time. The best thing you can do when faced with a situation that you don't understand, be that AI, be that a situation with people, just get curious. Ask questions. Well, what could it look like? My farmer back there was saying, well, what if I did learn how to use that tractor? Wow, how much more, land could I plow? That's what we need to be doing as well. I'm not afraid of AI at all. We're never going to take away the people element. It's going to be a great tool that will help all of us, but staying curious about it, learning about it, helping, others within your team figure out how to use it. That's what I think we need to be doing.
Right. Yeah, because when they say, hey, we're going to switch and start doing this, you want to put your hand up and say, I already know how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So that curiosity factor, I just, it's funny. I worked with a team and they were like, wow, we didn't think about it that way. So when someone's pushing back, instead engage them, say, well, tell me why. Why are you feeling that way? What do you think we could do better? Where would this fit into your role? And just being that open listener. But I just, I again heard something else this year that the word for this year should be openness. It's no longer mindfulness. We don't need to be as mindful about everything, but we need to be open. And if we help our teams be open to the possibilities, open to where things go, then we invite creativity. And once we get our teams into that sweet spot of, purpose with a little creativity, yeah, things can take off in a good way.
Right. Yeah. And it's up to those leaders to be kind of ferreting that out. If you notice the little discord, the conversations at the coffee machine, or your remote and your employees don't turn their camera on, whatever those are, you need to be asking those. But how many times do we have a leader say, well, that's not my job. It's not my job. I'm just here to manage them.
Yeah. Well, then that's coming from another leader that should be, putting that into the culture that no, I think everyone in any role of leadership, one of the things they need to just put top priority, on the year is helping their teams get curious, helping their teams, go in different directions, think different ways, because those who are stagnant are going to, we know what happens when things are stagnant. They fail. So
yeah. They get run over because there are the people that are behind them who are ready to jump into that. And this kind of goes with the title of one of your books, The Rubber Band Resilient Leader. And it's funny because I saw this on your website. Somebody said, Kathy gave us rubber bands and I'll keep it forever. And I thought, what the heck? So explain to us a little bit more about the Rubber Band Resilient Leader.
Absolutely. I didn't bring my rubber band. I should have, but yes, when I work with teams, we get big green rubber bands, which is my branding. And I ask, on a scale of 0, if the band is not stretched, to 10, how stretched do you feel? And the majority of people are pulling out the big 10s. They're stretching those rubber bands. And I said, oh, they break at 11. Don't go past that. Only one has ever snapped because I get these really heavy duty rubber bands.
And yeah, you don't want anybody wounded.
Right. But the point of the rubber band that I make is that when it is stretched, it is full of potential energy. That's what we should have learned in 9th grade science class. So if you take the rubber band and you just hold it and drop it, it doesn't go anywhere. But when it is stretched, it now has the energy to launch. It can. We aim them up at the ceilings, and it's really fun. I almost got kicked out of a Vegas a conference because
they all went flying in the air.
Well, they were aiming them at the chandeliers, so I kind of say don't aim at the chandeliers. But the point is that without that stretch, without that thing, those things that are making us think differently or get creative, we don't go anywhere. We just kind of stay. And maybe there's a few business models out there that can live in that world, but most can't. Most of us can't live without that thing that's going to launch us to the next thing. So in that book, I talk about being rubber band resilient. You want to stretch far enough to get that energy, to get that potential energy, but not so far that you break.
Right.
And in that model that I wrote in the book, the 3 steps to becoming more resilient are to understand reactions. That's the first stage. When this disruption hits, we're going to react. We're all going to have different reaction. You could be angry, you could be quiet, you could be contemplative. Understanding reactions. The next one is that you are going to reframe the situation. That's where we get creative. We think, okay, how's this going to work for us? And then the final piece is to re-energize from the disruption. So I'm happy to go deeper into any of those. So it's react, reframe, re-energize.
I love this because, how many times have we worked with people or for people who don't stretch at all? They've got their little box, and they're very safe in their little box. But like you said, they're not going to go anywhere. So let's talk about this more because I think it's scary, right? Because you do think, whoa, they could go, and I could go shooting across the room. But it's also, it is, it is where that energy is building. And I think that's where people are scared.
Absolutely. Because we know that, just like anything, any disruption has the capability to make us snap. And of course, I saw this directly with my daughter, and many of us, we've had a diagnosis, we've had a termination at a job, things that go desperately wrong. And then we think, okay, I can't handle this. How am I going to handle this? What because I feel so stretched. And again, that's the reaction stage. And as a leader of a team, I tell people it is so important to look at your team and understand how each individual is going to react. Because we're going to keep getting things that will disrupt us. But if we've got, like, I call them the angry one. So someone's going to get angry. Well, that's not really
Your rubber band doesn't stretch very far.
Right. You're right. Or it snaps. So what it does, it gets stretched and they snap and they get angry. There's the optimist. Oh, this is nothing. We'll be fine. Don't even worry about it. Well, then you're not hearing, enough maybe and acknowledging other people's. There's my favorite one of all. I tell this to people. This is not me, but it's the one that I've had to learn to honor when I work with people, and it's the worst caser.
The yeah, but.
The worst caser already in their brain says, okay, but in 2 weeks that's going to happen, and then in 6 weeks it's going to turn into that, and like by next year we'll just be like,
yes,
creates the disaster ahead of time.
Computers are running the world.
Right. But some people need to do that to process it. So I had a worst caser in my life, and I just had to let her go. Not like let her process it the way she wanted. And I would tell her, when you get through with all the scenarios, come back to me and let's talk about the ones that are bothering you the most. So reactions are key to that first step, because once, I like to call them, they're the guttural, they're the emotion. We have to do it when we feel the disruption, but then we need to move into the next phase, which is reframing the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And thinking of those bad things is not a bad thing, because then we know, okay, well, this could happen. How do we keep it from happening, or how do we deal with it, or whatever? But we just don't want them going down that rabbit hole and never coming back out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need it. I mean, those are all parts of the process of building that resilient behavior.
Right.
That we know, the first phase of getting through.
So then how do we reframe?
So reframing, there's several steps in this. One of the first ones I like to deal with, but a lot of people, especially in their business persona, don't like to go there. And we kind of touched on it a little bit. It's like managing the fear. So what are you so afraid of in this disruption? Where's the fear coming from? Because we all do this. We get these reactions. I'm losing my job. I won't have this. There's going to be a fear. So this is where I coach leaders to go deep and really ask the questions that will draw that out, because a lot of people don't like to talk about what that fear is, but we can't move through it until we acknowledge it. And I will tell a very personal story about the fear that I went through with my daughter when I got that diagnosis, when I was told, she's not going to live more than 2 years. And I dealt with a lot in those first 2 years. But then I kind of had this like setback, and I'm like, well, she was about 4 years old. I'm like, what are you so afraid of? I had to ask myself that one day. What is the fear? You've already dealt with the worst one. She will pass. She will pass. She will not, she will have severe disabilities. Like those I dealt with, but I was still had this breakdown. And then finally I said, what are you so afraid of? And it was so odd. The answer that came to me when I got real, I was so tired of people coming to me like I could no longer have fun, or I wasn't a fun mom. It was always, I called it sad eyes. People would look at me, how are you doing?
Pity, dear. See, how are you?
Right. That's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that I would always be thought of, oh, that poor mom. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I changed the way I talk to people when they'd be like, look, she's great. Look at her hair. Her hair has the most energy on her. I would make jokes. I would just kind of get through it. But so that's a very personal response. But in our business sense, same thing. We have to tap into, somebody might have a scarcity mindset. And so we have to tap into that. Okay. They think everything in small, I'm not going to have enough money. I'm going to lose my job, and I won't be able to support my family. We have to go into some of those So I
And
was
it
like,
spirals.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, it can. So that's one thing when on a team, when big disruptions come, really tapping in and helping people kind of get into their fear. A next step in this reframing stage is I like to say, this is where we get to be creative. This is where we get to say, hey, it's not business as usual. Something's different. What are we going to do about it? And we start asking really different questions so we can come up with creative solutions. So,
Right. I
yeah.
love that. So, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what the third is. The third.
Oh, the third. Well, I'm going to give it. I would love to give an example of creativity.
Yes, yes. Oh, because definitely.
I work with a lot of people and say, I'm not creative. I don't know how to be creative.
Now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they think it's like we're going to go draw. Or
Yes.
we're going to
I'm going to have to paint a Picasso.
No,
I
right.
could probably
Right.
do, but because it's not, yeah, I'm not a Monet there, house.
Right. Right. But wait, so you bring up a perfect example, and I use this. The first time I ever went to the Chicago Art Museum. I'm not from Chicago. I was visiting, and I'd gone with girlfriends, and we were going to see the Monets. And for people listening who don't know a Monet, it's very soft and it's subtle, and the images are pretty and calming because it was Impressionist time, and that was lovely. But then I went around the corner to the modern art part of wing of the museum, and again, there's Picasso, and Picasso's in your face, and it looks weird, and it's different, and it's like, what are we trying to do here?
Right.
And so I encourage people to go with the Picasso. He had a great quote, and it's the art. And I'm going to get it right here. The first step in art is often the destruction. So we have to destroy our preconceived notions. I mean, you could even do this in a very fun way of, okay, here's the manual we used to use. We're going to destroy it together. And you actually physically have a fun time destroying it. It's like, okay, now we're going to rewrite the manual. We have to do it this way, and let's get real creative. And when I help teams do this, we do prompts because artists use prompts. So, what if I had $10 million to solve this problem? How would I do it then? And I love this because someone was like, in a keynote I did, they said, well, we don't have $10 million. I go, I know, but it's just the prompt.
Pretend.
It's pretend. I said, what if you did? She goes, well, that's easy. I'd send my whole team to Hawaii. I'm like, perfect. Let's go with that. How could you send your team to Hawaii without going to Hawaii? And they ended up coming up with a luau, and they treated their team to a luau, and they got local sponsors, to bring some boats to their facility so they could like sit on the boats and pretend they were on a boat. I mean, they went all out, but it was just a simple prompt of how could we, help our team stay energized? What could you do creatively? So I love creativity as a reframing. And then, there's just several things that you can be doing as you're reframing to move to the next step, which is to re-energize.
Right. And on the reframing, I think when we give ourselves permission to explore.
Oh, that's a great word.
That is the thing, because, maybe it's not something that can be done. We can't go to Hawaii, but what can we do? And I think that's the thing. And that's where, you've got and I can say this because it's my name, the Debbie Downers, right? But those are the people who, again, you need to acknowledge them, because if you don't, they become those little pick people, right? Right? And so you say, you know what? I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Thank you for pointing that out. But here's what we're going to do. You kind of get them on board, but yeah, when and I don't care what business it is, why can't we be creative? Why can't we think about different things? I mean, we certainly had to do that during the COVID shutdowns, right? Where we really had to think, okay, we can't do this. What are we going to do? The businesses, the restaurants that all of a sudden started doing delivery. Or my favorite, there's a Mexican restaurant not far from here. They knocked out half a wall and put a drive-through in.
Oh,
and it's still there because they discovered, hey, people really like that.
Right.
And of course, the other thing that they absolutely had to do, and this was the people, Well, our menu's way too big for that. Well, they were right. So they reduced the menu. They didn't need 18 different types of taco. Right? What are your most popular, right? And it's kind of like at Chick-fil-A, you can kind of, or is it In-N-Out? Yeah, where they have the secret menus, right? But yeah, thinking outside the box is a great way for people to really, for one thing, it's acknowledging that you value them. And we all get tired of living in that same box.
Right, right. Well, and to your point, when we were speaking about AI earlier, and maybe there's some fear around that, this is the perfect time for any organization, anyone listening, to say, let's reframe the way we think about AI. Let's get curious. Let's get creative. What would it look like? Say, put yourselves in a, COVID situation. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Okay, how are we going to reframe it? How are we going to react and reframe to those things, those situations? And that's what, strategic teams do. And often strategic teams are at a high level in an organization. But I would encourage anybody that might be leading people or might be on a team, who's the strategic, visionary on your team, and what can you start doing?
Right.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before, and I've actually been to seminars where it's how can we bring play in, right? How can we do this? And it's really funny. In my shower, I have this little ugly duck thing that I got 30 years ago, probably, from a happiness person in the workplace. And she said, I want you to take these and put them in your shower, which I did 30 years. I mean, this thing has moved with me, right?
Nice.
And she said, because I want you every day to start with a smile.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just, for a long, I don't even always remember that the duck is there. But yeah, how can we bring play back in? I know you're not on Facebook very much, if at all, but there was a thing over the holidays that went around with this AI thing where and the prompt was a little more detailed than this, but it was put me in a fancy dress for a holiday party. So the sequence and all of that. I mean, and I just, for some reason, it didn't like my hair. It gave me totally different hair. Which I don't know why, but anyhow, and we all had a ton of fun with that, right?
Yeah.
Until the person said, I am a graphic designer. How can you be doing this? You're taking away my livelihood.
Right.
And I got it. I understood their fear, but we were having fun. And, I don't think she was designing us in our ball gowns, right?
Right.
But we did acknowledge that fear. And that's the other thing is, it's okay. This is kind of scary.
It is for her. Yes, absolutely. For graphic designers, for, I've written copywriters. I've written a new book, and, I was like, okay, do I need the copy editor for this, or should I just run it through? And, my editor convinced me, no, use the copywriter. There's still a human element, and you don't want it all coming out sounding the same. I'm like, you're right. Absolutely. So yeah, but again, that gets to her, the graphic designer you mentioned, getting to her curiosity about, instead of working through the fear, but then getting curious. Okay, well, how can I embrace this, and how can I help my clients use it? Not everyone's going to be an AI expert, but maybe you could be a graphic designer with an expertise in AI. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways. Yeah.
And you knowing how to use it. Maybe you don't need to go on location to do things. You can have AI put wherever the beach, in the back of your picture and things like that. Now, right now, it's still not quite good enough, right? We can look at it and go, aha. But, it is something to, again, like we were saying, embrace it. How can you use it? And get past that fear, acknowledge that it's there. Like you said, we all have it. We're going to have it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've reframed. Now what?
Then we re-energize. We're like, okay, you got a little bit of like, all right, I'm over some of the fear. I can do this. I can re-energize. A couple things that I say within this. I have several steps, but one is, get your people together. When you are re-energizing, when you're building this new thing, when you're moving forward through disruption, make sure you have those, 3, 4, 5 people, not your mama, not the guy at the bar, not that professional colleagues who can be that sounding board, who you can go to. I have 2 different groups I mastermind with, I can bounce things off of. I always say they can be in your direct line of service, or they could be, at the Rotary Club, or somebody who gets or understands that you're running a business or that you are managing a team. If you don't have those 5 people, when I speak at conferences, I'm like, look around the room. There are smart people here. I don't want you going to somebody that is in your organization. I want you meeting somebody else.
Right.
Most of us have a very generous spirit. And if someone is having a difficult time, if we're not giving away our trade secrets or, our people, we're happy to help. Hey, I'm in the situation. What could we do? So get people around you that will help you energize from the event. I like to say that this is the time where you're building your muscle. I talk about the rubber band that you go to the physical therapist and receive. It's just a giant, they call them resistance bands. You're going to feel a little resistance when you're re-energizing. But if you've ever had to do that resistance band in physical therapy, you're building a new muscle.
There's a reason it's a resistance band, right? Just when woogie, woogie, woogie doesn't do anything.
Right. So you might feel some of that resistance when you're re-energizing, but you have to always keep looking at it. But I'm building a muscle. I'm building a new skill set. I'm building a new pathway for my teams to excel. I'm building something new for my clients, customers, or residents. So looking at it as you're building something is really a great way to feel that energy. Right now I feel very energized personally by by AI. It's like, wow, I'm building a new muscle. I have a new skill set. It's a new tool. So looking at things like that. And then I will say the final one that I always talk about, and this takes me back to my wellness roots when I was helping my daughter stay healthy, is when we're going through a disruption and we're feeling the stretch, we must personally energize.
Right.
And help our teams personally energize. We don't do anything if we are burned out, worn out, maxed out, we're walking out.
Right. I'm not going to eat kale. But, it is things like, okay, maybe we're going to do a lunch, and it's going to be quasi-healthy.
Yeah. Or maybe you're going to do meditation. I mean, doing 5-minute meditations or helping your team, breathe. I would say, all I have to do is breathe throughout the day and actually pause for as little as, 10 seconds, and it already sets your physiology in a different motion.
Right.
So no, it doesn't have to be about just eating kale, but just, taking those moments for stress, taking those moments to laugh. Yeah. Eating a few good things is always a good idea.
I worked one time with a corporation. They, had chair massage. And, and it was absolutely fabulous. And then, somebody said, well, but what if somebody gets hurt? And so then they made it go away. There was that Debbie Downer again. But yeah, what can you do? It's interesting. I am part of a great mastermind group through C-Suite Network. And one of the things that we often do is before we start a session, we focus, right? We close our eyes. And it's funny because I'm always opening my eye, right? Anybody else got that right? But I'm one of those kids. How can we, so we're starting that meeting by having everybody focus. I was in a meeting earlier today on Zoom where they said, think about where your hiney and your feet are and ground, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, and just simple things like that. And you're going to get the people who roll their eyes.
Right.
And the people who, it's okay. They're going to do that no matter what. But yeah, just calm everything, because then we're going to be able to be more energized.
Right. Well, and, a broken, body is not going to be energized. And I've sat in sessions where I've asked, C-suite leaders, okay, now we're just going to breathe for like 10 seconds. We're going to take 10 deep breaths. And at the end, I'd like you to tell me, how you feel, and it remarkably, everyone's like, okay, I feel much more calm, more grounded, ready to move forward. But, it's just asking to do that one portion. I just, I just actually posted on LinkedIn because I'm always trying to help teams figure out how to acknowledge and celebrate one another. And, often it's the pizza party, it's bringing in some donuts, it's, going out for drinks. There's things that we do. And I'm not saying I don't love some of that too, but as a leader in this time of year when we are at the height of flu and cold and all that nastiness, why
I don't want to be sharing a cake thing.
but thinking a little bit more in an empathetic mode and giving everyone, a CVS or Walgreens card, say, hey, go stock up on your vitamin C and your zinc and, or, something that, aromatherapy, something that makes you feel better, or, bring in a corporate wellness, education session to say, hey, these are a few things that you could be doing to stay, boost that immune system. So there's ways to help your team re-energize personally that aren't so in your face. Yeah.
And some of them are the basic things that we were taught when we were 5 that we have forgotten. Say thank you. Right? On the wall behind me is the word grateful. Show gratitude. And now I'll be honest, sometimes you're thinking it's really hard to find something that I'm grateful for with that person, right? But, find something anyway. And let them, don't ever assume they know, because they won't know.
No.
And just say, hey, thanks, Kathy. This has really been a great chat. And I tell people, smile at other people. You might be the only person that smiled at them all day.
Yeah.
And because what we've been talking about is it's stressful, right? How many places have we been in? And I don't care what it is. They're understaffed and overworked. And if you show a little gratitude, whether you are another employee or are a customer, that goes a long way.
Yeah. One of the questions I encourage the leaders who I work with is to just assume that everybody has something going on in their life that's difficult, because the majority of us do at some point always have something. And then secondly, ask, how could I play a role in helping your day go smoother, be easier? Is there a resource you need? Is there something you need?
Right.
And usually they're taken aback, like, wow, you want to know how it would be easier for me.
Care.
Yeah, you care. You're actually showing empathy. Empathy doesn't mean that, you're just going to go ahead and give, I'm going to give you 15 minutes off. Maybe they don't want 15 minutes off. Maybe they would rather, come in 15 minutes later and you didn't even ask. You're just saying, no, leave early. It's just getting into those questions, asking what your team needs.
And it really is little things. It's funny. I was talking to somebody about this earlier this week. Your name, right? And so when I worked for big corporate America, my CEO, I reported directly to the CEO, and we all had badges, right? Name badges. And you had to have them on all the time. And he came to me and he said, we're going to redo everybody's name badge. I went, okay. And he said, I want everybody's first name to be big enough that I can read it from 6 feet away.
Nice. Yeah.
And I was kind of like, okay. And, I mean, he was the CEO. I was going to do what he asked. But then, of course, what happened was he'd be in, say, an elevator with somebody. And he'd say, hey, Kathy, how you doing today? And you're like, oh, my God, the CEO knew my name. No, I mean, he read it. But, or, somebody pass somebody in the hall. Or if they're like me, they don't remember names. And so to have that name badge, I mean, that was something small and little, but it made such a huge difference.
Huge difference. We all want to know where people know our name. We all want to go there. Yep.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about it at a lunch, and they introduced themselves, and so I, of course, deliberately used different names, and they just all thought that was really funny. But then, of course, I did say their name. But yeah, I mean, that is one of those things that we want to hear. We want people to know our name.
Yeah. There's actually a study out there. I use this study in one of my talks, and it says that there's a 22% increase in retention rates if a manager or supervisor uses a new employee's first and last name in the first 2 weeks of work.
Right. And if they get it wrong, okay, so you like stories. I'm going to tell a story, and we've only got a couple minutes left. So I worked for the American Cancer Society. Great place to work, right? But our receptionist, somehow, somewhere along the line, when I first started, they told her my name was Karen. And I was like, doesn't, it was not that big a deal. But my husband called one day, and he asked to, and she also mispronounced my last name.
Okay.
And so he called and he asked for Deb Creer. Her name is Karen Cryer. And who may I say is calling? And he said, well, it's her husband, and I'm pretty sure I've got her name right. And she, of course, was mortified. And I told her, honey, it wasn't that big a deal.
That's
But
funny.
it really was. I mean, and she, for 6 months, she called me Karen. And I got to where I answered to it, which was, of course, the mistake. I should have politely, corrected it and things. But yeah, it's Karen Cryer. And it was like, okay. And we had name tags. That's what even made it funnier. But yeah. So, for people who are saying, okay, Kathy, I almost called you the wrong name. Okay, Kathy. We've got a problem in our office. We're losing people. People aren't happy. Come help us. How do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm pretty easy to find all over. I'm Kathy at kathyparry.com. But I'm Parry with an A, Parry. I always say if you put it in Kathy Parry with an E, you're going to get Katy Perry, the singer.
See, that's almost what I called you.
And she's not going to come help you, but I'm my email is also the same, Kathy at kathyparry.com, and kathyparry.com is the website. And some of the things I do besides keynoting, so I do, I am a professional speaker. So if you have an association leadership retreat, you will get energy. I can guarantee that. But I also work with organizations, especially like leadership retreats. That's one of my sweet spots. I'll come in and do a full day of all of this type of, building your teams up. We walk through what I call the Power Up retreat and workshop, where we're chugging some of those skills. And as we talked about before, finding those impurities, identifying those impurities, and helping your teams manage those disruptions. That's kind of my sweet spot.
I love it. And we will, of course, have links in the show notes to your website. This really has been so much fun, and I would love to chat with you again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, my final thought would be disruption happens. It happens to all of us, and we cannot stop it. But what we can do is build up that resilient skill set so that we can better manage and move through the transitions and disruptions, so we stay energized and our organizations stay energized as well.
I love it. Such wise words. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun getting to know Kathy Parry. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.